Hi, my name is Bob Greenyer and I'm a volunteer with the Martin Fleischmann Memorial Project. So welcome this 9th of March 2023, that should probably read the 19th of March 2023, to O-Day Elevation Plan. 19th of March 2023. Oh God, no, I'm hearing myself. Okay, right, so let me just correct my error there. How are we? How are we all this evening? Day if you're in the States, and the morning tomorrow if you are in Australia. Can you hear me? EBB, John Weir, Corky Goss, great to have you here. DIY Projects with Sussex. 3, TP Sven. Hi, Alex del Castillo, D2105K. The Bippo5 Artifact. Hi guys. Hi Cosmic Dave. Hi Gordon Doherty and Greg. Hi David Cooper and Creating Awareness. Okay. So I haven't had a lot of time to prepare things for you this week because I've been on a bit of an archaeological mission. However, I've got some things that I think it's important to get to you. The first one is the title slide that I have today, which I was showing with the wrong date, but now it's the right date. Let's hope we are saying that correctly. It is the 19th of March here today, I believe. So here we go. So this is an image I took, or part of an image actually, I took in the Cairo Museum back on the 26th of December 2021. 2021. And I particularly like this seal. It's a bunch of, it was part of a bunch of seals, a very large number in fact, arranged in display units. I will share some more images in the coming weeks and months. Many, many, many seals. And you can imagine, you know, you want these things to be precious and meaningful in some way to either your superior knowledge or your superior capability or some such. And this particular seal I like very much because it has the Christ center coming in here, and then it has these spirals like this, going across the center, and with the leaders here offset. But feeding across the main axis here is 2 vortices, but at 90 degrees to these vortices. And I just thought this is maybe someone who just thought this was an interesting thing to put on their seal. Or maybe this is someone that understands the technology to some degree and decided it would be nice to, whether they were allowing other people to know that or not, but nice to have it on their seal. And you know, when you come to these things with fresh eyes, and my eyes weren't as clear as they are in recent months, but I certainly in 2021 was able to pick this out from the crowd, and there are other ones that I picked out, but this is the one I want to share tonight. I felt it's important to see if there are kind of skills represented in work that maybe even predates the pyramids, because there's obviously this argument that, you know, this is just something that humans did, and I believe that certainly humans that paid attention to their surroundings would have discovered this natural process that I believe is the same as ball lightning. And so I had the opportunity to spend a couple of days in Larnaca in Cyprus, and I went to the museum there. And what you're looking at here are stone vessels, pouring vessels, maybe a cooking vessel here with a spout in it, And maybe another cooking pot, I don't know. But these are quite intricate forms. And I have it here from another angle, you can see. So you might imagine this sitting on a fire and cooking some stew, and then you lift it up with maybe some sticks going through here. And, you might prepare some spicy mix in here or some crushed fruit or whatever and pour the juice out into whatever you're using to drink. And they are rather fine. Here is another vessel. You can just catch the edge of it here. So there maybe was a handle that broke off. But here again, it's got this spout on it. And maybe there was a handle here and a handle here. And it was similar to this one that you see here. And yes, are these granite? Well, some of them look very, very hard, don't they? But they have also these ones here, which are like for milling flour and stuff. And I've got some close-ups of these, so you can get a better impression of what they are. And here is a slightly out of focus one on the left, but a closer-up impression of this. But now comes the shock for me. The shock was this. This is, and I'm probably going to say this wrong, this is from Chirikoitia. And this is 7,000 to 6,000 years before Christ. Yes, my friends, this work in this settlement in the center of Cyprus was 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. The pre-pottery, this is pre-pottery according to them, Neolithic village of Chirikoitia, I will have said that wrong, I'm sorry, Vuni, lies on the slopes of the prominent hill in the Moroni River Valley, in the foothills of Troodos. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site in the Troodos Massif, some 6 kilometers from the sea. The site was occupied continuously from the end of the 7,000 years before Christ to around 5,500 years before Christ. Okay? So what we are looking at here is a settlement that ended 6,500 years ago. It covered an area of approximately 3 hectares. It consisted of numerous stone and mud brick circular dwellings, reflected a strong and prosperous community. The village was sufficiently organised to support the construction and maintenance of public works, such as large enclosure wall, with a complex staircase providing controlled access to the village. Crowded buildings, one against each other, were separated by narrow strips of land used as passageways. The dead were buried in individual graves beneath the floors of the buildings, in some cases with special offerings. Stone workings was particularly developed and diverse, producing impressive vessels, tools, figurines and ornaments. So was the working of animal bone, with numerous bone tools pointing towards weaving of fabrics and basketry. The people at Chirikoitia hunted fallow deer, herded sheep, goats and pigs, and fished. They practiced agriculture, cultivating wheat and barley, but also flax and legumes, vegetables to you and me. They collected fruits and nuts, figs, acorns, olives, pistachios, plums, and wild pears and almonds. Sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? Okay? At around 5,500 BC, Chirikoitia, like other pre-pottery Neolithic sites, was abandoned and was reoccupied during the pottery Neolithic, although no architectural traces from this period survive. Okay, now about the stone vessels, there's details here. At Chirikoitia, the stone vessel industry is extremely sophisticated. Coarse vessels, usually large trays or basins, are made of breccia, sedimentary rock, or hard limestone. And finer vessels, often spouted bowls, ladles, or basins, are carved from a diabase or soft limestone. Vessels made of perishable materials such as wood, reeds, and skins were surely used, but nothing survives of those. Some vessels have a spout, handles, or a tenon, and others have anthropomorphic features. These characteristics, as well as engraved or relief decorations on some vessels, are indicative of the artisan's great skill in stone carving. Ground stone vessels would have been used for food preparation and consumption, as well as for the processing of non-food matter such as pigments. So, for all of those, me included, that thought, between the Tigris and the Euphrates was really where all of the action happened, then this was a bit of a wake-up call for me. And obviously, Cyprus is, you've got every major early civilization, it surrounded Cyprus, okay? Egypt to the south, and you've got Syria, you've got Iran, Iraq, you've got the Romans, the Greeks, the Turks, everything. Like, it's completely surrounded by high technology civilizations. But for goodness sake, this is 9,000 years ago. This is like it's twice as old as the pyramid. Supposedly, if we're to believe that. Now, if we are to assume that the pyramid is whatever 4,500 years old or whatever, let's say it's that, and New Grange, for instance, is 5,200 years old in Ireland, in Southern Ireland, then these people were making advanced stoneworking. And okay, so maybe it's not the hardest of materials. But do you think maybe in 4,500 years they might have been able to grind a flat stone piece of granite? Maybe. 4,500 years of practice. Or maybe they found a technology in that 4,500 years that was better than grinding one stone against another. Just maybe. Just maybe. But what it shows, that as early, potentially, as 9,000 years ago, they were creating incredibly complex bowls like this. And this is to a design for a purpose. This is to a design for a purpose. It's not like guesswork. And it's symmetrical, and it's symmetrical across its axis, across the features in it. And it's not symmetrical where it doesn't need to be symmetrical. And it gets quite thin here. So I think quite probably that the stonemasons might be good enough, reasonably, to create some quite complex pieces of stonework. Okay? All right? So I'm just putting it out there because when you see these things, you have to recognize them for what they are. And the other thing is I've got a lot of beautiful images that we can use, and that they will be publicly available, that show that this island was trading with Egypt, and at one point they were handed a stele. I actually have the image on my phone, and I don't have it available to share, but I'll share it on the blog afterwards. Actually, it's one of the other photos I took. But anyway, it's a stele, much like the one of the Assyrian god, where you've got the headdress of the sky gods and the flying disc of the sky gods, and then the kind of like tuning fork type thing, and it goes down. But it's also got the classic disc with the two wings and the tail. Again, another representation of this so-called flying disc. And this stele, the cuneiform on the side, it's in apparently a German museum, and they have a clone in Larnaca in the museum I went into. And what it is, it's basically a thank you note from the Assyrian king for the, however many it was, the 7 or 12 or 13 or something, kings of Cyprus, pledging their allegiance to Samaria or to the Assyrian lands or something. If that's the case, then there was a deep ties between these nations. So it's not just that they had this relationship. There would have been knowledge sharing going on, and clearly you can see it in the artistry. It's absolutely spectacular. If people get a chance to go to that island, really spend some time at the archaeological sites. I only got a little taste for it, but I can tell you it really reset my respect for people that supposedly were around twice as long ago as supposedly when the Great Pyramid was built. Now, with that being said, I'd like to go and go over some of the things that emerged since the Wormhole presentation. And I think the first one I think we probably should talk about is something actually I was sent today. And this is something you can do in your own time if you haven't had a chance to look at it. But Black Shoe 10 shared with me a video literally today, this afternoon. And it talks about this character, Joseph P. Farrell, who apparently wrote this book called The Giza Death Star Trilogy, and has apparently got a new book coming out, or may even be out now. I'm not publicizing this in any way. It's just I got sent this, so it's interesting. And this video was apparently published on the 2nd of February 2023. And there was 3 things as I listened to it that really stood out. The first one was this. That he said that people have witnessed, he said there are reports of people witnessing a pale blue light coming from the pyramid, that being the Great Pyramid. And in this interview, he speculates that it is a cold plasma form of hydrogen. And so, I agree. I agree. Although it could be this kind of like ball lightning type light, but I believe it's caused by the hydrogen entering into a state that emits this kind of radiation that causes this kind of blue glow. He says that there are parts missing from the pyramid, and he bases this on the translation of these cuneiform tablets from Sumeria by Sitchins, where there was this big war apparently. And what happened is that, and it says it in this second clip that I've given a link to, where there was a war for and with the pyramid. It was over the pyramid, and it was using the pyramid, apparently. This is according to Sitchin's translation. And literally, he says, in those slots where I'm in the pyramid, I'm going, something's been taken from there. And I took that video and I shared that with you a couple of presentations ago. Apparently, there is an argument that something has been removed from there. And so what happened, according to Sitchin's translation of the cuneiform, was after this battle, they went in and they took stock of what was in the pyramid, and they literally disassembled parts of it. So my theory that it was literally sabotaged, it actually would appear to have a historical document that supports this hypothesis. Okay, so this is all news to me. And so, there we go. That's what it said. And yeah, so apparently apparently there were other things removed. And I actually have images in the antechamber pictures that I took where it looked a bit like something was stripped out of there. I don't know, but I can definitely say it looked a bit sus that there was something in that chamber, and it was in the grand gallery. And when I started overlaying the sacred geometry as derived from the actual LENR research, it pointed to this slot being absolutely in the exact perfect place for the sort of golden ratio spiral to be excited. And that's as it was. The other thing is that he talks about the primal matter. Now, my argument is that the hydrogen is split into the 3 things: the protons, the electrons, and this dark matter, which Shishkin says is condensed torus of relic neutrinos, which I would argue it's a form of energy. It's a form of fairly stable energy. And if that can then be converted, then it is a form of energy that ordinarily doesn't interact with matter, but can become other matter. And I believe that is able to then play a role in fissioning and fusing matter. And so, this was very, very fascinating to me to go through this. So I really recommend you take a look. If you go to this blog and go and have a look at that, for me, it was like, oh my God, like it's one thing to go into the pyramid and go, oh, there's something being taken out of there pretty clearly. I wonder what that was. And then to have this journey of realizing potentially. Now, there's this guy that did some idea about the pyramid being some energy structure. And apparently he argues that it was hydrogen in there as well, and I agree that the hydrogen is the key element, and I've argued precisely why and the scientific basis behind why, which is only actually recently emerging, but it harks back to Tesla's understanding, but Tesla only used back to magnesium. Magnesium was the lightest element he used to create the etheric matter streams. But hydrogen's 2,000 to 4,000 times easier to do this proper separation, and it's very easy with this static state of the 5 electron volts, which is easily achievable by any of the emissions that come off the type of radioactive material in the form of granite that's available in the quarries relatively nearby in Egypt. And so I argue that, and the fact that the Russians have shown that these same birdies, these same structures are produced with decay products of uranium in the form of cesium-137 emissions. So like it's a slam dunk. It can do it. If you put it there, it would do it. And there's nothing you could do about it. It would do it. And now, there's some argument that there was a lot of more complex technology, some sort of type of resonant structures, and there may have been some resonant. I think the whole thing is resonant to a degree. But what we have shown in the case of the HHO, which is the the separated water, is that alone on a 10 yen coin, without any specific environment to create resonance and without any other technology, just that in a plasma, with plasma going on, i.e. atoms that are charge separated, you are getting the process occurring with the same structure on the 10 yen coin. And you're getting the same process occurring on the tungsten welding rod with exactly the structure that has come out of the mix, as it were. So what I'm saying is that nature, as long as you've got ionized atoms, and in the case of those instances, the ionization is occurring because you're burning the HHO, and that's creating enough localized energy to exceed this 5 electron volts. So let's say if you take a hydrogen atom and a hydrogen atom and you fuse them together, that's something like 4.45 electron volts. Now you imagine that is hitting a piece of metal, and that's happening millions and millions of times in a fraction of a second. It's very likely that statistically you're going to exceed 5 electron volts with some inhomogeneity in the energy distribution, so that you would then end up by this proper charge separation, and then you could get this clustering and so forth. So in that instance, it happens. We know it happens. We've shown it happens, and there's nothing special going on in terms of the arrangement of the materials. Okay. In the case of the pyramid, you're not wanting to get this thermal situation. And how do you get the thermal? Well, you get the thermal when carbon gets involved. So if you remember when we were doing the AMASA testing, when you add carbon into the mix, that can get things to be hot. But if you just like, if you're only ionizing it in a cold plasma state, but you're hitting those hydrogen atoms with sufficient energy that they are properly charge separating, but not they're kinetically above thermal radiation temperatures in terms of electromagnetic wave energy, then you're not going to get those thermal effects going on. Okay, and so that is what I see is happening. Now the other thing is, some people have said, well, how is this separating the water? Now, I don't know if there's two examples that I gave many times. One of them is from the first book. I can't remember the name. You can look it up. But the first book on ball lightning, I think it was published in 1924 or 23 from memory. The research was done up to 1919 or something. It spanned back hundreds of years. But one of the examples which gave the sort of potential energy in a ball lightning was a ball lightning that went into a barrel of water and boiled it off. And if you remember my discussion at the time, it would look like boiling because you would have bubbles, you would have gas bubbles, and the water wouldn't be there after a while. However, if it was actually if it was disassociating the water without actually thermally boiling it, it would kind of like look the same, wouldn't it? And unless you wanted to get close to it and settle match to it and see the whoof with the the burning of the oxygen and the hydrogen, you wouldn't know whether it was boiling or it was just disassociating the water. So maybe it was disassociating the water. The other example I gave you was one of the anecdotes of Dr. Georgi Igli in his studies of ball lightning between the 80s and 90s or whenever it was in Hungary. Okay, and in this one you might recall it was a ball lightning that came into the view of the person making the anecdote, and it kind of destabilized, and out of it came a load of water. Okay, which implied that the water inside the ball lightning wasn't going through this process of either boiling or disassociation. Okay, and it was also having its mass negated whilst it was in there. But the interesting thing, the water in there was protected from becoming like burning or whatever else. But so when you look at what I was showing you with the if I can find the relevant part that I want to go to now, give me just a second here. Okay. So on this one here, now it could be that water comes up through groundwater into this zone, and it periods of time it takes a certain amount of water in here, but once there is enough water converted to oxygen and hydrogen, the water outside cannot go in through the coherent matter layer. It can't go in through here, okay? So it might be that you never need to pour water down here for it to operate. But I would rather that you had control over that. And when I look at the images that I shared subsequently, it may actually be that the device is to a degree converting the material down here into protons to a degree. I don't know. And this needs to be investigated further. But what I'm saying is that any water extra you put down here after this coherent matter layer that's forming this, it would be, in my view, extremely intense when it's operating properly, would not be able to go through the coherent matter layer. It would just either boil or disassociate on this boundary here. In fact, if you were to come down here, you would either boil or disassociate. And the way that I think potentially the disassociation is going on, let's say we have some water here in the well, whether it's coming up through groundwater or whether it's actually put in here deliberately, it comes down to the proton in the water having spin. Okay? The oxygen in the water doesn't have spin, but this distortion, this disruption beam is so intense that it is literally ripping the proton out of there, leaving the oxygen nowhere to go except to also be disassociated. So you end up with disassociating the water in a non-thermal kind of hands-off way. And so like it's actually interacting with the spin of the material. Okay, and then that leads your gases to come up here, and your heavy gases to go into the lower chamber, and your lighter gases to go into the upper chamber. And as I've said before, the here it's actually here, and with this the raised column, and we're going to look at that from the overview in a second. And this is where we're going to go from the elevation here to the plan. And what I did say to you is that because this goes round in the phi ratio and it gets smaller around here, the actual part, this part of the ring is actually closer in to here. And so there's a reasonably clear boundary between what I'm saying is the granite ionization slabs and the gas that's up here. And so yeah, that's essentially what I'm saying there. Now, if we go back to some of the things that I have observed since, so when I did my wormhole presentation and the previous presentation, it was quite rough, my layout of that. But I've gone to some length to improve the material on that, and I shared that in the blog for this. Now, the first one is these close-up images. This is obviously not a circle, and we'll discuss that in a little while. And this is obviously not quite a circle, okay? It has this layer, this fold here, and I discussed why that is. I'm going to show what I believe is going on and why this is this shape and why the other side is the other shape, and it is entirely consistent with everything we have seen from other physical experiments, even those things that we have not seen. Sorry, those things that we did not conduct ourselves by third parties. Okay, so and I'm also going to be discussing this structure down here because I saw something similar to this in lion experiments. This triangle, I called it. It was in a Hutchison large aluminium sample. It was like this triangle in the middle of nowhere. Why is that there? And I've also seen it in a experiment by Alexander Parkhomov that produced excess heat over the course of 225 days, more than 2.14, I think it was, mega electron volts per nickel atom. Although, as I've argued, I think much of that came from not the nickel, but other interactions going on. Okay, so I have to flip the pyramid here because of the way this is working. This is the material here goes into the wormhole and out here, so you're looking at the back side of the action inside the pyramid. So I flip this, and this isn't the correct structure here. It's an approximation in the artwork of Wikipedia. There's a better approximation by Petri, and I have Petri's book, and we'll look at some aspects in there in a little while. But it is this particular shape. So the thing is, what happened with the Parkhomov 225-day reactor, and we'll see this in a little while, is that in that experiment there were two samples. So basically, Alexander Parkhomov, Dr. Alexander Parkhomov, he did this experiment and he shared parts of the reactor with, I think, 9 different labs, of which or organizations, and the MFMP was one of those. And I had the pleasure of looking at those in Alan Goldwater's Magic Sound lab. And when I was studying that, there were only 2 parts of the internals of that reactor that were decided to jump around when I pointed the electric beam at them. And those 2 parts are some of the most interesting parts of the sample that I was given. And I shared those actually in 2019 at ICCF 22 in Assisi in Italy. And I'm going to go into more detail about that because when I was lying in my bed, having gone and done this archaeological sort of investigation in Cyprus, I'm lying in my bed. I thought, it can't be. It absolutely can't be. This second part, it can't be the same thing going on as is going on in this Henk urine Vega sample, but I think it might be. What is important is what it shows us and what it might allow us to hypothesize about what we are going to see when we investigate this structure further. Okay, so now the other point is, and please don't let me forget this, I'm going to be looking at work that was done again by Mikhail Solen. Now, if you remember, when I did the original work studying the LION reactors, there were these magnetohydrodynamic structures came out. I published them, and much later down the line I came over the Solen quantum coherent nuclear reactor patent from 1992. Well, there's things in there that I hadn't really been able to see it so clearly in the LION reactor, but I think you may agree with me, it's exactly what is going on in this particular experiment. Exactly the same thing, which goes to the level of accuracy and deep understanding that the Russians must have had at the end of the Cold War period in how this technology works. Okay, so these are all really accurately aligned. So here you can see where the actual thing, it gets stuck because I think this is the active area of the sacred geometry here, the inner part that actually does most of the work. It actually hits the boundary of the metal. It can't really go out, and that actually locates it in position. And then the disruption area, the disruption beam comes down to almost the crack between the metal brass that's on the top. Now, what I want you to remember is that the iron, apart from iron 57, which is about 2% of iron, is non-spin material, but it is ferromagnetic. So these things like to bind to the iron because it's ferromagnetic. It is iron after all. Now, the brass is, all of the copper is spin isotopes, and about 4.11%, the zinc 67, is a spin isotope. So there is stuff being moved around in here. And also, we showed in the ball hole, this was another Henk urine experiment, where, if you recall, we had this, the iron-rich crenellated microsphere. It was 3.6 microns in the core, and then all of the copper and zinc and the brass was pushed to the sides, okay? And that is because it's all diamagnetic, okay? So not only is the copper and zinc, all the copper is spin material, so it can be shifted. The other thing is that the material is diamagnetic. Both the copper and the zinc and the copper oxides and the zinc oxides are all diamagnetic. So they want to get away from a magnetic structure. Okay, and that, I believe, is why you are seeing the spread of the material going on in the other side of this structure. As you can see, the Sothic triangle coming down here is a pretty darn close match for where the material is swept round to. Okay, it doesn't go further than here. It's kind of like something else happens to it. Okay, all right. In this one, we are looking at the inside, and again, so this comes down to why have we got this kind of figure of 8 structure here over here? Well, if you recall, each of these has 2 subtors on it. The wheels within a wheel within a wheel. Okay, so and so that always creates at these when you've got this fractal of 2, it always creates these 2 spiral structures that come out. Okay, now if you can imagine that is going through the hole here, but it's going through the hole as a wormhole, it comes round here and it starts to splay out. It splays out and punches a hole through here, making this hole. Okay, making this hole. Yeah. and it comes through, and it kind of goes beyond. As it goes beyond, it goes at an angle, and it shoots out the other side, and creates this structure over here. That is my working hypothesis for what's going on here. And this whole kind of splat over here, and this splat over here, and the movement out to this far reach over here, I believe is because of the diamagnetic nature of the materials involved. So actually, to understand this and to make this work, you couldn't get a better material than brass, and bronze and these kind of materials were available to the Egyptians and to people prior to them. So, you know, at some point at least. So the other thing you can notice is that the top side of this torus in here is inside this line that is going across here. That all of this area is this kind of black color. Now, we will find out when we can get this on a large format table. Is this carbonaceous, or is this an oxide of zinc, which would be black? Now, sorry, an oxide of copper, which would be black. The issue I have with that is that an oxide of zinc would be white, and since it's a reasonably even mix, why are we not getting more white than black? Since, you know, zinc melts at a lower temperature and so on, you would expect it to be more white. So this may actually be more carbonaceous going on. Only time will tell. But what's going on down the bottom here is even more interesting in my view. Okay, you've got the pipe that goes around this structure here and up and into the open area. The other thing is that this is all open area. This is all open area. It's literally a volume in which the technology doesn't interact. And even up here, when you come up into the so-called King's Chamber, it's only this lower part where you actually have a blob of something, okay, which is where I'm arguing that potentially the heavier elements are synthesized, okay, if that's what's going on, okay. Now, if we come down to the top side of the brass, this sample here, for those of you that are seeing this for the first time, the top side of the brass here, okay. Now I'm looking at this kind of, where is it? This bit here, okay, there, okay. This is this structure, and what I've got is Petrie's better working diagram of the structure, as best aligned as I can do it, okay. Now, there's this kind of antechamber that goes to the depth. Now, remember, this brass is 3 millimeters thick. So this structure is thick, but I don't believe it goes all the way through. It literally, I think the monopole was keyed by two things. It was keyed by the magnetic substrate and where this was able to interact with this brass. Okay, and I'm not showing you, am I? So sorry. Sorry for that. Yeah, so what I'm talking about is this particular structure here. I was saying that I believe it's keyed, the overall monopolic structure, the sacred geometry structure is keyed by the magnetic nature of this part of it and the disruption nature of the main N-level cone, okay? And that is interacting here with the brass. And this is my pseudo location, which lines up with the antechamber. And this antechamber has depth. So we're looking at it here in elevation, but it actually goes into the brass here. And that makes sense, actually. And essentially, the other lower part here, there's been various explanations for why this is so craggy and so on. But what I can say is I believe that the deep part of it here is this part of the structure, this part of the structure. Now, if I go down to the next one here, I'm zooming in on this, and you can see where the antechamber lines up. It's within this kind of birdie structure that was identified. Now, I don't know, I can't say if this is a one-off. I don't know. I can't say if there's anything interesting really particularly going on in here, and maybe it's just circumstance that it is lining up. It's like the heart of it's here with this little toroid thing down here, and if there's a slight registration error, then maybe that toroid would be right in the center of this antechamber, okay? But I don't think anything was left to chance with this device, this reactor, as I'm calling it. Okay. Now, for me, the real shock was when you look at the other side of this. So we have to, you can see I mirrored this here, the antechamber here, sorry, the subterranean level. It's mirrored. If I go down to the inside, okay, and we look at the bottom here, okay, this is on the Wikipedia graph. There's this plume here that rises up from the center of the subterranean layer and comes up here, and then wraps itself into the material. Now, it also comes round this structure here and around this side, which is the kind of path that the so-called well goes. And in fact, almost the entire length of the well is somehow covered with this black kind of like rising smoke, as it were. Okay. Now, when we look at this with the Petri type diagram here, we can actually see that the finger that reaches in, this like, let's call it the finger of the god's toolbox. Yeah. It's reaching into the subterranean level, and it has these, you know, you've got a vortex here and then a counter vortex here. Okay. And they are burrowing into and almost got the steps that are right there in the rough sketch of the subterranean level. Could it be like that? I don't know. But what I can say is at least for the vortex and anti-vortex, these structures, the vortex and anti-vortex, we've seen it so many times. It repeats itself across experiments, across experimenters, across time, and across sequential experiments such as the LION experimental series or the ultra experimental series, that if this is the same every time, and we see this heart shape or slightly offset heart shape in so many experiments, then why would we not say that the lower part of what's going on would be the same every time? And if that's the case, what we are seeing here, in my view, is carbon coming off, because carbon is a ready subset of brass, of the elements of copper and zinc, okay? As we showed in the tungsten interacted with by the moment caused by a maser gas creating the fractal toroidal structure. It ripped carbon, at least we can see the diamond layer, this layer of carbon on the tungsten. So, you know, it can take carbon off, okay? However, when you are looking at something like water, well, you've got oxygen there, and it's not easy as I argue, to directly interact with that, with this disruption field. But so the only thing is hydrogen. And so what would be coming up here is hydrogen in the same direction and path as is shown by this carbon. So the carbon, in my view, here is actually showing the path, yeah? Showing the path from the subterranean level. And remember, we've seen these triangular structures inside aluminium. So the moment that's caused by the fractal toroidal structure that extends down, it's not the toroidal moment, it's this disruption beam that goes the other way, okay? That is able to work through ordinary matter like it was not there, okay? And then at this point down here, it's able to pull the matter apart, rip the matter apart. And if the matter is just water, then it's going to get hydrogen out of there. And if the hydrogen's gone from the water, it's going to leave oxygen, which means you've disassociated the water. So you're going to get gases coming up here. You're going to get gases coming up here, right? You don't need anything fancy. It just does it. It does it. And the other thing is, so you would build this solid state, and it is effectively a solid state reactor, okay, in my view. So with that in mind, I'm going to load up the PDF, and I'm going to overlay some of the Solen patent drawings from 1992. 2 from his quantum coherent nuclear reactor. If you want to know what I'm talking about, I would suggest you go and read my 2020 or the PDF, which you can get from the YouTube video, and the YouTube video is called the monopole clutch, and it talks about this and our work and how it relates to the work of Solen. Okay. So let me just get this PDF up. All right. Actually, I've got something quite fun for you right now. Before I show that, I'm going to show something which I thought was quite interesting. And then I saw someone raving about it and saying, oh, it's a new discovery. And I go, is it? Okay. All right. This is my photo, or one of the several photos I took, having managed to get my super duper camera, or rather the project super duper camera, past the guards who wanted to basically steal it from me. So this is the so-called sarcophagus, or whatever, in the so-called king's chamber. Okay, and the absolute geniuses that run the tourism there, which I'm sure they're all very good, but they had 2 or 3 get this, freestanding air conditioning units. However many kilowatts they think they were cooling the inside of that chamber, they were heating it. Right, so I have absolutely spectacularly beautiful images of this thing here. In fact, there's a lot of visual, depth data here. However, this thing that someone was getting very, very excited about, I caught here by capturing the light from this neon light glancing across the top of the surface. And what is it? I'm going to go there. It is an alpha. Okay? It's an alpha, and I grant it, it's actually quite nicely carved in there. Now, this, I can't remember the name of the person. For some reason, he thinks there's an omega here, right? I don't see it. I see a lot of other stuff that looks a bit damaged along here. But this looks nicely carved into what was the flat surface. Arguably, this could have been done at another time. But I think it probably would have been, I don't know. Anyway, whoever it was thought that they were seeing something new, and there it is. I don't see the omega. The alpha makes sense to me. The alpha makes sense to me. Why does it make sense to me? Well, because if we go back to our previous O-Day presentations and we go to the circle of life here, okay, we have, as you know, the alpha and the omega. And the alpha, i.e. kind of like new life or new material, begins at the end of death. Okay? So once you have destroyed your material in your breaker, and it goes all the way through your pyramid, or all the way through the in the ether stream, and gets to the point of being born again, okay, over here, then that is where you have your alpha. Okay? So as I showed in the Coptic art here, you have your alpha and omega here with your breaker and your maker or whatever. So I'm therefore arguing that I agree that this is an alpha, and I could accept that whatever was coming in here was being born again, whether that be matter or something else. You take your pick. But this, I believe, is alpha. And so there we go. This is the beginning. So it would be coming in theory, if this was correctly in the place, the point at which the end of death is occurring is literally at this point. Literally at this point. Okay? Okay, so I don't buy the fact that there's an omega here. I don't see a reason for it to be there. It doesn't make sense to me. The alpha makes complete and consistent sense with all of the logic that is presented in all of the key pieces of stone that I have seen that is encoding this, including, of course, the number 10 Downing Street front door from 1775. Okay, so there we go. So I will share this image, and you can go, oh, I think it's that, and I don't think it's that. Right? Okay. Okay, so I will go and get the image that I was going to share. Which is... Bear with me. Okay, that's not the one I want right now. Give me a second. Okay, so maybe I've got it in here. Okay, let me just make sure I know which ones I'm talking about. And I need to go... Okay, so this is from Mikhail Solen's 1992 patent. This is the principal drawing, and over the years we have shown the flower clusters in various works, these ring-like clusters. We have shown the overlaid, and we'll come back to these again when we're looking at the plan view of the pyramid, these overlaid magnetohydrodynamic structures, these magnetic charges of two types according to Solen. And we have seen a lot of these triangular structures. And so in my head I was looking at this particular triangular structure here, and I've lined this up with several things across a couple of different experiments, principally in the LION reactor, but also in other experiments. And he says these are all of the signatures of the process. And I'm going to look also at this, and you can make a judgment about this as well. But I'm going to first, I think maybe, am I going to first look at that? Maybe, I don't know. I think maybe I'll look at these ones. Okay, so give me a second. I'll pull up the right image. Okay. So the things that I found quite interesting about what Solen did was, and I couldn't explain initially, was, and because it was so seemingly precise, was what is going on with these lines that he's got coming out here? When, you know, what is going on with that? Is there something that's important about these lines coming out there? And maybe there's actually method to that madness, because if we actually look at Solen's patch of spots overlaid onto the inside of the pyramid here, you can see that this series of spots that come out here line up with this blob of material that's up here. And this one is kind of like the exit point is very similar to the exit point at which this blob comes out here. So in his, you know, and then we've got this little bit that sort of comes out, and we've got a little bit that comes out here, you know, and then this bit down here, we've got a couple of blobs that come out of the line down here. Okay. Really, he could be seeing the same thing. So let me just take off the pyramid there, and we take off the sacred geometry. Okay, so we got that going on there. So yeah, so he's got a bit coming out this side. He's got this little bit coming down here. He's got some coming up here, and he's got this coming over here. The only one that he appears to have missed is this. You know, maybe the structure was growing. I don't know, but I have to give this guy credit, because he absolutely nailed the process. He absolutely verbatim nailed the process in his patent in 1992. Okay, so that is the first one I have for you of the overlay of Solen's structure. So what I've done is I've just taken the one that's up here and rotated it onto the inside of the pyramid to get that. And you see here, I'll take off the pyramid in there so you can see it better. Okay. Okay. So that's that one. Okay. Then we go to the iron plate. And we need not that, and not that, not that, not that. Okay. So now what I'm going to look at are these two structures. This one here, which I never had an adequate explanation for. I didn't understand why he drew this seemingly random structure, but everything else he said was extremely precise. So, and it matched what I was observing and what I'd already published, particularly with these things and so on, and these things. And then this one. What is going on? Okay? And in his patent, he says that you don't need to do any tests. You can literally physically see frozen in the solidified metals the signs of coherent nuclear reactions. Okay? And so you can probably do this in your head. Look at this structure here that comes from a quantum coherent nuclear reactor. Okay? This structure here. Okay? Now look at what we've got here. Now look what happens if I overlay the said, not that one, there, not that one, that one. There we go. So all I've done is I've flipped it vertically, okay, and overlaid it. And so on one side, you've got the overall brass and it comes down, okay? And on this side, you've got the thing around the second lobe. I'm going to get rid of my mugshot there. Okay, and then you have this ring just around the outside. And of course, the ring is mirroring what you're seeing from the other side. So if I bring up, where is it? Where are we? Yeah, okay. Yeah, so the ring is this blob over here, which is kind of stuck on there. But it's the same thing in my view. It's very precise. And if you actually look at his other drawing here, it's different, but you can see it's the same. He actually, in this case, gets the kink going in here. So that is this one over here. Okay, there. Okay. Again, I've flipped it and rotated it. But other than that, now the interesting thing about this one is you can kind of see where he might have got these blobs from. They're like these blobs here. This blob here, this blob here, this blob here, this blob here. They're like black blobs. And when we've looked at these up close, and I've shared much better images of these are where your soliton, your magnetic charges have clustered. And so the implication is that, and you know, this is the same place. You've got the magnetic charges here, the magnetic charges, the magnetic charge here. These are where these toroids are forming. In his case, you know, there's actually a lot of correlation between where his blobs are and the blobs are here. All bar, you know, he's got different perspective. He might have been working at different scale. The resolution of the microscope he was using pre-1992 may have been very poor. And, you know, this is the best job that he maybe could have done. But I think he was looking at the same thing. He was looking at the same thing. And if that's the case, then nature is doing the same thing literally every time. It's doing the same thing every time. And that's good, because that means it's repeatable. Now, where this gets very interesting for me, and why I kind of like got a little bit excited in my head before I even thought the other things might be related, was with this lower area. So let me just get that up. This so-called, the kind of infamous triangle that I refer to so much. Okay. And so here is our overall structure here. Okay. And what I'm referring to is this, and the bit that I want to show here is this triangle. And in my dream, I was rotating my memory of this over this structure, and I thought it couldn't be. It absolutely could not be. Anyway, so there we go. Where is it? This one? No, not that one. No, not that one. Not that one either. No, I've got it. Where has it gone? There we go. Look. It's very close. It's very close. Is it the same thing? I don't know. Is it? If it is, then this is of extreme interest to me. What is this? What is this? And we've got this actually at much higher resolution, as I've shown you. You can see it here. It is a much higher resolution, okay? And we can see that there are areas of brass, and directly adjacent to them, there are these highly disrupted areas. Now, we know from the copper run through the Vega experiments of Henk Uren that at crystal grain boundaries, just as Matsumoto saw in his book, Steps to the Discovery of Electronuclear Collapse, at crystal grain boundaries, you get these, what he called microball lightning formed, and they result in the synthesis predominantly of carbon and things like silicon and oxygen and so forth, but a lot of carbon. So this really could be carbon. And if that's really carbon, then I'm really fairly, let's say a good degree of confidence that it would be disassociating and disrupting material at this point. And when we look at this, it's like glassy, and we've seen the glassy carbon in the LION reactor. So, this looks glassy to me, and that's a telltale sign of exotic vacuum objects. I think if this was oxides of zinc and copper, you would have black and white, but we're just getting this glassy black, which is maybe glassy carbon, or it's glassy carbon and silicon mixed together, which we've seen coming out of other HHO experiments. For instance, the eruptions from the HHO exposed indium 75 micron foil that we did with Dr. Roy Shinamasa's gas in Japan in 2019. Okay, so it would not surprise me if we're seeing carbon here. Okay, now this is where I'm going to go back to the work of Alexander Parkhomov, because again in my head when I was away, I was thinking it can't be, it literally cannot be this other feature. And then knowing what this feature has and the elements that it has in it and the elements that we know were in the reactor, we can paint a hypothesis for what might be in here. And if it is in here, then we have very, very strong evidence that this disruption zone is a real thing. It will always be this shape, as weird as it looks. It will always be the shape identified by Solen in 1992 as part of his quantum coherent nuclear reactors. It is this N-level Tor interaction zone in the disruption area, and it would, in my belief, explain the Great Pyramid of Giza's ability to get hydrogen in a solid state way. Okay, so give me just a second and I will pull up the relevant thing here, which I want, which is a different directory. So okay, so give me a second and I will get this for you. And I want so the presentation I'm referring to is one that I gave, as I said, in ICCF 22, and it's called Parkhomov 225-day reactor. And just let it run the adverts. Yawn. Come on. Right, so it's my ugly mug. So there was two things that I highlighted that I couldn't really explain, but I was starting to see a pattern emerging. And one was what I called the pretzel, because it looks exactly like a pretzel, and it's this heart-shaped structure here. And this was the one of the two things that I could flip over using the electron beam in the scanning electron microscope of my colleague Alan Goldwater in his Magic Sound lab. Okay, so this was, and I said at some point I think this is going to be very important, this pretzel structure. Okay, so that was the first thing, and then the second thing was somewhere here. No, back. The second thing was this, and it was a blob here. And we're going to look at that in much more detail than has ever been shared before, because I think it now needs to be said. I didn't really understand what it was. It was the only one that was like that. But the blob had lead in it. It also had copper and tin and zinc. So when I reported this, or rather when actually when Dr. Parkhomov was reviewing my presentation, he said, like, we have not seen lead in some of the other people that did the study, not seen lead, but then no one else saw this structure. So was I lucky enough to get the thing that did the work and the work product, or the thing that it acted upon? I don't know. But that's what happened. Okay, so we're going to go and look at the data for that in much more detail. But before we look at the data, I'm going to do a quick overlay for you. And the overlay is onto our structure, which we potentially think is where the disruption beam goes. Okay, so that is here. This is our structure, potentially where the disruption beam goes. And so I will turn off that because it's not relevant. And there we go. Is it the same? I don't know. It's pretty close. Now, the thing is, we know this is about 3 mil thick. And we know that this is actually quite large. It's physically large. I can see it. And it's 3 or 4 mil on the sample there. Okay. But the wormhole loop is vastly bigger than the pretzel. Okay. So the other thing is that this has quite a bit of lead in it, as you will see, and it looks like it's broken here, and you can actually see the thickness. So it's actually not a very thick layer. So wherever this disruption zone is, if it is true, then it is a very specified area, and it's not very thick, but you can precisely locate it, I believe. Okay, so what can we learn if this is the same as this, and what would it tell us about what we should see here? Okay, well, I can do that for you now. So the first thing is, as I said, I was able to rotate it. Not really because I wanted to. It just flipped over when I was pointing the beam at it. Okay. To be fair, some of these tubes here that you will see are actually silicon dioxide fibers, and they were fibers that Alexander Parkhomov used to separate the silicon carbide, the carborundum, the silicon carbide core, which held the nickel powder that was supposedly the fuel, but I actually think it's the initiator of the process. It actually allows for the energy localization that leads to the proper charge separation, that leads to the etheric matter that then clusters everything together into this structure that produced the pretzel. Okay. And actually, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and show you other images of the pretzel before we look in more detail at that. So here I've got some very nice images of the pretzel. And we've shown that now we understand that this section here is basically half of the half. What am I doing? Rotating. I'm rotating it. It's half of the what do you call it? The Visa Capices in the center here. So this is actually as it flipped. When I originally found it on the surface, it was like this. And in fact, I originally saw it, if you can believe it, like, I think this. Can you see it? Can you see it? It's up in the top right-hand corner here. And actually, at this time, it looks like a figure of 8. It looks like a twisted knot. Okay? Maybe if I zoom in, you can see it. It has 2 central spots, and then it has a figure of 8. over there. Kinda. Not perfect, kinda. So I kind of like zoomed into that, and I kind of missed it the first time I zoomed into it. You can see just the edge of it over here. And I zoomed into it a bit more, but then I was focused at the wrong place, okay? And then I finally kind of got it a little bit into shot, and I got this, which is again still a bit out of focus. So I got it a little bit better. You can see it starts to move, and I'm going, oh no, why is this thing moving? Okay, move just a little bit there. Okay, and then I finally got it in shot, and so we have it here, and contrast adjust that, and you get like something like this, and then this is looking at it with the different methods. You can see HLU down here, and you can see a different method here. Okay, with the contrast adjust there. Okay. And then after I took those two shots with the two different viewing method, the thing flipped over. And we ended up by seeing a sphere at this point on this side. And you can see that it, even between these two shots, it was moving around. Okay. So I thought, well, I'm going to lose this thing. It's interacting with the electron beam quite a lot. So what can I do? Okay. Anyway, so if we've got this thing, which is our sacred geometry, heart-shaped Vesica Pisces type structure, in theory, we should have the other thing. And the other thing is what I called the nugget. Okay. And like I said, we had the nugget viewed with several different ways of viewing it. And there was some charging going on over here, so I took some other shots. And I actually got a bigger shot here. This is actually higher resolution here. And the interesting thing is that over this section of this piece of lead, there was this piece of silicon which seemed to be truncated, silicon dioxide that seemed to be truncated, and there was another thing on the center of this structure as well, piled up on top. And in fact, I was fortunate enough to look at it in this method, where it's not looking at the geometry, but you can actually, so it's looking at the geometry, rather it's being able to see the elements as well. But you can actually see that, whereas you can't really discern that this is a separate object, you can very, very clearly see that this is piled up on the center of this, which is piled up on the center of this circular bit here. Okay? What is causing that? And then what happened was it flipped over. And when it flipped over, this bit, which is an agglomeration of things, is still stuck in the center of this area here. Now, what is that area? That, my friends, in here is where the bottom of the well goes. The bottom of the well goes into this area, which is differently affected. It's different. It's this area here. So if we overlay the Parkhomov material, this area here is basically where the well dips down into. Okay? So what is going on? Is that a different magnetic field? You know, is that... now, when you look at this from the top, when you look at the well, this well structure from the top, the well is, from the plan view, much closer than this. So you might say it's further away. So it's into and out of the screen. So something looks like it's happening differently here, differently in this place. Okay, and that is what we see here. We see something here which is kind of like stacked on top of each other, and bizarrely it is silicon dioxide. We know that this is silicon dioxide, and it stays in place and it's locked to the rest of the object. How is that occurring? Okay, all right, so what are we actually looking at here? I have a spreadsheet here, of the different materials. Okay. And I've done some analysis here with, which of the materials are diamagnetic, like lead and tin and zinc and copper are all diamagnetic. Obviously, nickel is ferromagnetic, calcium is paramagnetic, and silicon is diamagnetic. And then you've got paramagnetic and diamagnetic for carbon. Okay. So we looked at a couple of areas. The first area is this background. Now, there was all over the inside of the reactor were these very fine filaments of carbon. And this is observed by Matsumoto in his experiments. And he says it's one signature of the process. He says that this here, coming out of the point of electronuclear collapse here, this is a filament of carbon. Okay, that is what he said. And he actually, in the back of his book, he has a good number of images that are showing this filament of carbon. So maybe I'll get an example here. So here's one of these filaments of carbon. Maybe you can see it. Maybe you can't. That there, filament of carbon. That's not here. There's some more fibers of carbon there. Okay, so he says that's a signature of the process. Well, I can tell you that the internals of the reactor was actually replete with that. So if you look at that 718 here is what is it? By atom percent, it is 82.21% carbon. And what is the rest of it? It's 14% oxygen by atom percent. And silicon, and essentially there is no nickel, there's no copper. I mean, there's a very little nickel atoms, 0.31% nickel atoms. No calcium, copper, zinc, tin, or lead. Okay, so that is what is in the background. It wasn't in the reactor to begin with. It was synthesized over these 7 months, these 225 days. Okay, these filaments of carbon. Okay, the second thing is this 717, and that is this silicon dioxide felt, of which there is this bit that is locked to the structure here. Now let's have a look at what that is. That is sample 717. 717 here is, as you can see, 21% atom percent. Sorry, hold on, have I got the right thing? Am I looking at the right line? Yeah, here. It's 11% is silicon, 11.5% is silicon. 34% is oxygen, and carbon is 54. Now, the 54 carbon might be atoms that are deposited on the surface or impregnated themselves as part of the process. But essentially, this started out as silicon dioxide filaments. Okay, so you can again see there's no metals in there other than this trace level of nickel. Okay, so that is the two background areas. Now let's have a look at the bulk here of this structure, this area here. So I've got this large area here, and I've got this as, I think it's core felt 714. Is it core felt 714? Let's just check. Okay. Core felt 714 is by atom percent 3.83% lead and 2.3% tin, 1.96% copper, and 1.3% nickel. The interesting thing is, of course, lead weighs a lot more than even nickel and copper. So the percentage by mass here, when you do the calculations, comes out at 30% lead, 10% tin, and like 4.7 and 6. So the metals here are 50% of the overall mass of this structure. Now, it still isn't a lot nickel. It's only, which is nickel is the fuel, but it does have nickel throughout it, okay? Now, copper is something that's known to have come from, if you take, say, nickel 62 and you put a proton in it, you end up with copper 63. If you take nickel 64, you end up with copper 65, okay? So, and because of the ratios of nickel 62 and nickel 64, is something like 2 and 1% or whatever. It's not a lot of percents. You probably can't get more than about this percentage of copper just by adding protons to the nickel. Okay, it's not going to be much more than that. It's going to probably be less actually. But where is this tin and the lead coming from? Okay, where is it coming from? And then there's a couple of other samples here, 715 and 716. Okay, 715 is not a lot of lead, some tin, and it's got comparable copper, but it's got more nickel in it. It's got nearly twice the amount of nickel in it. And then the other one is down here, 715. Okay, 715. All right. Okay, so this is 35%. So this is more lead, bit of tin. Anyway, the point being, and this has actually got calcium in this 716, wherever it is over here, 716. This has actually got calcium at this zone. And actually, we did a map of it when it was on its side here. And this is a little bit colourful, so let's go to the various elements. Carbon is in the background everywhere. You can see that it seems like it's got carbon on the edge. And in fact, what's happening is the beam from the EDX is seeing reflected characteristic X-rays or emitted characteristic X-rays from this side. And given the fact that it's got carbon in the background, this probably isn't carbon in the material. So we can probably discount quite a bit of the carbon in this as kind of like a reflected characteristic X-ray. But look at the calcium. There's a whole bunch of calcium in blobs along there and literally almost zero in the background. Okay. Copper, almost zero in the background, but again, it's only really seeing the edge. But because copper is such a good emitter and good interaction with electrons, you do see more through it. Okay. Nickel, no, that's in the background. Okay. There is a little bit, but nickel was the fuel, remember, and it's not got a lot of it in there. Oxygen, not a lot there. Lead, yes. A strong signature of lead, zero in the background. Tin, again, zero essentially in the background, but a strong signature there. Again, we're only able to see the edge because of where the EDX thing is. And zinc, which is 2 protons on from nickel, is in relative abundance in the actual sample here. So, for a little bit of time, I was thinking maybe this is some solder that somehow got into the reactor and blah, blah, blah. But if it was just solder, it wouldn't have these other elements in there homogeneously mixed in, like calcium and like potentially zinc and stuff. You can get lead tin solders, but it wouldn't have those other things in there in those kind of ratios. So what is going on? So for me, this was always a bit of a mystery. The two things that were a big mystery for me were why on earth is it able to move around like the pretzel was, but only those two things. These silicon dioxide fibers, they would move around because they get charged, and the next one to them gets differently charged, and then they repel each other. But these two blobs, this one being metal and the other one being carbon type fiber, mostly with some metals in it, why were they moving around? And why, when it moved, did this non-conductive thing, this silicon here and whatever this is on top, why did that move with it? What was binding this thing to that thing? So those were the kind of mysteries that I had. And I'm at a point of thinking, well, probably if it is this special disruption zone that's part of this overall process, and we know that the reactor of Alexander Parkhomov produced the most heat per nucleon of fuel, or nuclei of fuel, of any LENR experiment, in my view, that's been reported, to the best of my knowledge. If you just consider the nickel, but I don't think most of the fuel, most of the energy is coming from the nickel. I think it might have been this structure and structures like it at different scales that were responsible for a lot of the energy. And if so, what is going on? Well, we can't say we are synthesizing silicon, oxygen, or carbon. Okay? We can't say that. Why can't we say that? Because we had silicon dioxide in those fibers and we had silicon carbide in the tube that it was in. This is annoying, but that's just the case. Where is the calcium coming from? Well, in every other assay of the reactors from other parties, they observed an increase in calcium. We observed this as well. Before the experiment, the materials had less than 1% in there, and it typically had up to 20% in there. So calcium was being formed somewhere, but we see that calcium is specifically formed in zones, or it's present in zones within this homogeneous blob, right? Then, or not homogeneous, inhomogeneous, but blob, it's a blob. Then where is the zinc, copper, tin, and lead coming from? And all of these elements are present in this blob. And lead and tin are, and I think even zinc, are only present in this blob. If that's the case, it is synthesizing heavier elements. This is a maker disruption zone. This is a maker disruption zone. This could be a breaker disruption zone. But if it's a breaker disruption zone and we are starting with copper and we are starting with zinc, I would expect to see in this disruption area at least oxygen, silicon, and carbon. Okay, now, arguably there was some carbon, in carbon dioxide in the residual air, but the level of concentration doesn't make sense to me. Now, if we've got heavier elements formed, and we're starting with copper and zinc, what are those heavier elements? It would be interesting to see if there are actually heavier elements in here, or in this area down here, where there's this very different kind of effect going on. Okay? So, that for me is, you've got the Solen work. Where is that? You've got the Solen work here. Where is it? That one. Pointing to the fact that probably he saw the same kind of structures, but again, everything's low-fi, low resolution back in at the end of the Cold War with whatever tools they had available to them in 1992. Was he seeing the same thing? I think probably he was. I think that it's also here present in the reactor of Alexander Parkhomov, which was known to produce excess heat, and it shows potentially the synthesis of heavier elements, and potentially some of the nickel in that reactor ended up becoming carbon. And maybe some went heavier and some went lighter. Some went heavier, some went lighter. Now, the interesting thing about the 3D structure, if we go to the 3D structure, is that the substructures are a fractal self-similar structure of the overall structure. So if we go to the what is it I want to go? Not that one. I want to go. These yin cones here, these ones here are self-similar to this. Okay, to that one is self-similar to the yin cones. Where have they gone? These ones here. And these ones here, the N-2 cones, are also self-similar. Okay, so you can imagine that maybe there is some making and breaking going on to a degree at each level. Okay, and maybe if you have a breaker one, because like in my view these can either be mostly a breaker one or mostly a maker one. But if you imagine, if you're breaking apart a heavy element, you end up with lots of substructures that are all different sort of scales. Okay, like you know, you end up from tungsten, you end up with strontium and carbon, at least what we observed with the Yamaza gas. Okay, so when we are looking at, let me get this up. When we are looking at, where are we? Not there. When we are looking at the making and breaking going on here in the ultra experiment here, when we are looking at this, okay, this is, you know, where we got the thing here lined up, okay. We've got a substructure here. The main tour comes down here, let's say, or up there, whatever it is. But the substructure is doing the making or breaking. It's the same process going on, but at a different quanta. And it might be that in this water process, it's not sufficient at the N level. It's not intense enough. It only becomes intense level enough at the N-2 level. Okay, or the N-1 level. Yeah? Okay. And so, you know, maybe this is just breaking in this instance, and maybe in the instance of, if I can go on there and I can bring up Photoshop, is it going to let me do it? In this case, it's actually doing more making than breaking. Okay. Now, if you break the copper and zinc into smaller fragments, you will gain energy, because if you are going from copper to something lighter than copper, as long as you don't go below iron, you are going to be gaining energy. If you go lighter, then, you know, you're going to be losing energy per nucleon. If you are fusing, in this instance, you're going to be gaining energy. But if you are, for instance, taking hydrogen and you are doing a 2-to-2 reaction, so that you've got some fusion and some fission going on, you will still gain energy, but you will create lighter elements, as an element that's below that. So, you know, there's all kinds of different ways that you can have interactions when you have 2-to-2 reactions. But it actually, the process occurs with millions of atoms, billions and trillions maybe of atoms simultaneously. Okay, so now I want to come, I've done a lot of the elevation things. I'll do a little bit more here with the 3D, because I've got this set up for us here. Okay, so yeah, so I've got the overall structure here set up, and what I've got is I've got a bunch of different images here with our overlays in place, so you can see those. You want to screen grab them. Okay, so I can take off the thing here. We go the main tour here. Okay, and we go back to the pyramid inside alone. Okay. And then you can see where the Christ center is. It's actually kind of like a space. There's this space here. Okay, it's literally like a little bubble that comes up. And that's what you see. That's what it shows. I didn't want to do that. No, didn't want to do that either. Give me a sec. Okay. And we have Okay. So I think you get the picture. And then we'll start looking at a couple of top-down issues. So I think the major top-down issue is why is this a kind of like a this kind of like half on, right? Well, firstly, where you've got the visa capaces, it doesn't seem to interact inside that visa capaces. So if I put on the lemon here, okay, and okay, so firstly, where this is cut is outside of the visa capaces, okay. Secondly, on the other side, if I turn off the lemon, you can see that the dimple in here, in this structure, kind of lines up with where this N-2 Tor structure comes into place, okay. Of course, this is occurring on the other side. It's not occurring on this side. Okay. I don't have to flip this because of the way it's set up. So if I go to inside alone, again, where the N-1 Tor is, it completely fits into the structure on this side. This kind of starts to get a little bit disrupted around this N-2 Tor's disruption area. And that's that really. And if I turn on where the Grand Gallery is, you see the Grand Gallery is coming up here. But of course, this actually is a little bit further in. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to bring up some plan images here, and I just want to talk mainly about what is going on with why there is, if I can just put that in the background, maybe do that. Why this is the shape this is, and how that relates to not that one. Not that one either. Inside alone. How it relates to what's going on here. Partly it's because these materials are diamagnetic. So when they get captured by the copper gets captured by its nuclear spin, and gets turned to a jelly, but it's not a liquid, it's not molten, and it gets shifted and condensed into a wormhole or whatever, and it comes out here because of the intense magnetic field produced in this structure, because of the hydrogen in there and so forth, because of that intense magnetic field. When it becomes ordinary matter again, it gets shifted out, and so it like moves away from these core structures which do most of the work. Okay, so that is my hypothesis. So I will get the top-down images. If you have any questions, throw them into the kind of chat there now, and I will read them in a second. Okay, so what am I looking for? So in terms of the hydrogen point of view, this is from page whatever, or appendix A7 from the Pyramids and Temples of Giza by F. Petrie, and it's from a very long time ago, except this is a new edition with some additions by one famous Egyptologist. and the point that I think is important to raise here is this swinging door of the Great Pyramid of Giza. And if you look at this, you can imagine that you could get a pretty tight seal between here and here, and it just under its own gravity does the seal. And then all you would need, I mean, is you could probably put chicken fat or something, I don't know, on the boundary there, and it would do the seal, and it would just be under gravity. Okay, so you know, quite a wonderful piece of engineering, really. A little bit more issue on the side. It depends whether the door was actually like a wedge shape. If it was a wedge shape and it went into a wedge shaped socket on the sides, then one can imagine that also that would seal. So but it might be sufficient, depending on the production rate of gases, to, you know, have that sealing better. But it may not be necessary depending on the rate of the production of gases. Okay. Okay, so the thing that I'd like to draw your attention to here, and this is in the 2017 paper in Nature about the first void being discovered, the second new void being discovered above the Grand Gallery. Okay, and here is their image here of the location of the various elements in the pyramid. And so you can see the center line here. The actual line of the Grand Gallery is a little bit off the center. It's a little bit off the center. Okay, and I believe that that is correct. And we know that these things align themselves not in a straight line, as it were. And I'll give you a little bit of random kind of a correlation for that. One is the fact that we know these yin-yang structures. Okay, one is a cone with a pit in it, and one is a pit with a cone in it, right? So this is the breaker. This is the breaker on this side. This is the same as we would imagine is going on this side of the pyramid. It's this is the breaker here, okay? So it's on this side. So this would need to be above this one, if you know what I mean, if we're looking into the page. So therefore, if you're looking at the plan view of the pyramid, then this one is above. And I think, it's more to the east, okay? This is more to the east. This one would be, and you don't need to see it, but it would be more to the west, okay? And therefore, where it dumps the material would be to the west, and that would, for me, explain why the King's Chamber extends into the west under my hypothesis. Okay, so and yeah, that's the different paper there. Okay, so they have some other nice details in this paper. So this, of course, this is the first paper. So at this point, by using their muon technology, they had it in these potential places, but they've said it can be lower, and it can also be down, or it can be flat, or whatever. But I'm arguing that the position is in a way that it can feed into the upper part of the structure that it needs to feed into. If we go into here, and we go here, and we need our n-1s, and we will go to pyramid inside. So it needs to have the chamber feed. It needs to be above here, and it probably is a mirror image of the Grand Gallery, and it would need to feed the hydrogen into the top n-2 TOR. Okay, So in here. Yeah. And so that's where I predict they will eventually find it is. Where am I going now? Okay, so the interesting thing is, it is literally, this is the elevation, looking at it from, I guess, well, it could be north or south, I guess, this is east-west, so you're looking at it from the south, I guess, through. But you can see this new chamber is directly above, okay? And here it is from south to north, and east to west. So you can see that the new chamber is literally exactly in line, okay? It's exactly in line, which is exactly where it would need to be feeding the sacred geometry structure, okay? All right. So with those two elevations, so this is a plan, and this is a different elevation to the one that we've been looking at. We've been looking at the south-north elevation, not the east-west elevation, and we have not looked at the plan. But the plan makes sense for the logic of what we are doing. The other part is that it's in and out. So we see it's in and out in the actual how it plays out. It is in and out. It is in and out. It is in and out. Okay. In and out. Okay. So there's 2 points I need to get about, is why this comes in at an angle and ends up producing this this figure of 8 over here, okay, and what other things I wanted to do? Yeah, that's mainly it. Okay, I think so. Let me bring up something here, and I'll go there. And what do I need for? Okay, give me a second here. Sorry, it's going to take a few seconds. Okay, so if you recall, when we were looking at these bubble structures by this third party, and we were comparing them to various things. So there's the bubble structure, and this is in the lion, and we overlaid the two like that, and we also looked at the spiral galaxy, and we overlaid the two. When you've got this is the n-1 tour, let's say, and it's firing out a beam, and that there isn't more than a fractal 2 structure. Okay, so we've only got an n-1 there and n-1 there. It comes in close, so you end up with the bar spiral galaxy here. So it comes out and then it goes around and then comes in. Okay, comes out, goes around, comes in. So it's squished in this axis. Okay. Now, if you imagine that the thickness of the metal is here, the entry point is going to be kind of like, it's going to be not perpendicular to the surface. It's going to be coming into the material at an angle. And so I believe that that is what is causing this penetration here with it going in from here. It comes through the wormhole, starts to come out of the wormhole and punches through, but it's not doing a full circle out and in. And we saw the same thing occurring in the LIVESTREAM reactor. If you imagine, if you remember, I showed those cannons going across the valley, and they weren't. Some were actually going literally pointing directly up and coming straight down. This was many years ago, okay. But some were like that, and they were shooting across a valley. So that's the kind of same thing that I see is going on here, and that is what I believe is occurring like here, okay. Now, if you had a bunch of other toruses aligned around here, it would end up going in a full circle. And that's what you would need if you were to use the same kind of technology for an anti-gravity craft, okay? You would need to confine this so that, one, it would go in a perfect circle, and two, it wouldn't have these beams coming out, okay? All right. So, and I think because the N-2 level Tor is also two structures, that creates a vortical structure that's coming out. And when that goes through and it starts to spread out, it's kind of overshoot. It comes in here and it kind of like, there's this vortical process going on with two ends to it. And I think that probably accounts for the figure of 8 type structure that you are seeing over here. So it's basically going through here, through the center of this. You can see that this is definitely not punctured. And it comes around here and it kind of like, it goes flat to the surface and cuts through the surface. And that is why you see this coming at an angle. Okay. And that is essentially what I think is going on there, and accounts for the observables. Okay, so then I just to clarify my point on why this needs to be one side of the center line, and why the other one's slightly the other side that interacts with it. I think the very best example, I've shown you where it occurs with the ultra experiments. I'm going to show you where it occurs humorously with the Acropolis in Athens. So this is part of the Ionian type columns, or the columns on the Erechtheum Acropolis in Athens. And if we look at this, we see that you will have a spiral going one way, which is at this level, and then you have a spiral going the other way, and it's below, above and below, above and so on. Obviously not on the corner bits. So above, below, above, below. Okay, and so you can imagine that, you know, this one is, let's say, I don't know, breaking it, and it comes around here, and this one's making it. Let's say it's like that. But they're actually representing these bracket structures as one being above and below. So this is this knowledge of the process, or is this just representation in architecture of of information that someone thought was important at some point and passed down through the ages? I don't know. And I think, you know, you could argue one or the other, cart before the horse type thing. But I'm going to bring up the lion data, because that is for me the most clear representation of what's going on, and it ties it back to the work of Solen. Okay. So yeah, this is from the monopole clutch presentation. And you can see again these magnetohydrodynamic structures of Solen represented in patents that I found subsequent and years subsequent to posting these in the LIVESTREAM reactor. And as you can see in the LIVESTREAM reactor, from the outside, this part of the structure is above this one. And from the inside, the one that is above is actually still above, and it has a beam coming out the back, coming round and coming into the center of the other one. Okay? All right? So, and like I say, this is behind here, and you can see it's behind here. So this, in my hypothesis, is the north breaker, and it's breaking the material, putting it into wormhole, comes out of here, and it starts getting wide and messy by the time it starts coming into the maker over here. Okay? And there we go. You can see everything you need to see in this thing. So this one that you're seeing on the left here, which is on the right here, is, in my view, the one that's, well, let's see if I can get both of them up at the same time. So like that. Okay. So here on the north side of the pyramid, you would be looking at this one over here. So that on the right and that on the left is the one that would be on the north, and it's in front. Okay. The one that would be on the other side, which is kind of like in the volume of the pyramid, it doesn't really matter because you're mostly dealing with etheric matter. So it's here and it's here, okay? And because the calcium carbonate is essentially non-spin matter, apart from 0.27%, like 0.27 of 1% is spin matter, but the rest of it's non-spin matter. What you're doing is you're creating prima materia, etheric matter stream in this thing from the hydrogen, and that then passes through the center and is condensed into something which then comes in and does something in the king's chamber, as it were, let's say. So you're not transferring ordinary matter. Here we are seeing some ordinary matter being transferred along with the etheric matter. I kind of get a sense that this might actually be silver. I still am looking forward to the day when I can get this under the SEM and find out exactly what the elements are here. Okay, but the principle is shown here. And so that is what is going on from a plan point of view. Now, there are other aspects to the plan. You know, you've got this offset with the subterranean level. You've got the offset with the King's Chamber and so on. But anyway, I think it's all fairly adequately explained. And that probably is all that's needed to be said about the plan aspects relative to the hypothesis. Yeah, I think that's pretty much all that needs to be said. I would really like a decent 3D, accurate 3D model to confirm this. And, you know, I don't know the offset between these two structures exactly, but it's clearly enough so that you can see the division here. It's clearly enough so that you can see the division here. Okay, but even with those offsets, the flux that goes between on the back side, which is exactly what would be going from one side here through the pyramid and over here. And I will do a 3D model, you know, rough mock-up of how it's working from here to here, probably on this overlay. I wanted to do it for this presentation, but I think maybe you get the idea anyway. and so forth. So yeah, that's really that. So any questions here? So yeah, I think the key images are the fact that those two are in line, and that is essentially what you're seeing here, and Solen nailed it in 1992 really. Yeah, Corky, I honestly never expected this, but I will share something with you. It was it was December I think 13th. No, it was, yeah, the night of December the 13th coming into December the 14th, I think, and I was flying to Rome to a military base to share our first positive results that we'd achieved as a project in 2012. And I was on the flight and I was sketching, like, we got to have a logo for the project. And I just had a vision. And let me get that thing up for you. I have it right here, I think, somewhere. I have it. Can I download that? Let me see if I can download it. There we go. So I sketched this on the tablet. It was on one of the first tablets that you could get at the time. That's not worked well, is it? Give me a sec. Okay. No, that's not going to work. Okay. You'll probably see that on YouTube videos or something. In fact, you can see it live. What am I talking about? You can actually see it live in the bottom right-hand corner of your screen right now. That logo there. Can you see it? Yeah, it was a military base. It was just a military base because that's where they were doing their cold fusion meeting. Right? So you can see down in the bottom right-hand corner, that's the logo. Okay? And so there it is. And I sketched this in about 10 minutes. No, about 3 minutes after having a bit of a vision. And my logic behind it was triangles are strong structures. I wasn't thinking at the time that the triangle is the alchemical symbol for fire. Right? I wasn't thinking that. And it's this orientation, by the way. And then I drew this sketchy kind of fire in there, but it's not fire. You don't see any smoke. And the idea of enclosing it within a triangle was that it wasn't requiring oxygen. Like if you put a flame that's normal chemical oxidative fire into a closed volume, it will snuff itself out. Everyone knows that, basically. It's a first level kids experiment. Okay, so the idea of having a flame burning in a pyramid, which I now see it as the eternal new fire, the new brackets eternal fire, was the concept, and that's what you see down in the bottom of this stream right now. And so that has been the logo of the MFMP for all of these years. And it's fitting that it turns out that, in my view, the pyramid is the best example on planet Earth of this technology in operation. And the actual work is done inside of the pyramid, and it can beam that energy out in etheric matter streams. And the structure that is doing it is exactly the same structure that is in the Tesla's Wardenclyffe Tower. There we go. And exactly using the Sothic triangle and the disruption area and the D4D ratios and everything. It's all the same thing. There we go. All right, so I will look at All right, so I'm going to look at your questions now. If you've got any questions, fire away. What we've looked at today is to clarify the main thing I really actually wanted to clarify today was why this is the shape it is. You know, the Vesica Pisces, the way for some reason that causes things to, you know, you can actually see the line of the Vesica Pisces on the top of the brass here, but it's why it cut in at a certain area, in a certain place. It makes sense when you review what we've seen occurring in nature on all scales, And then the alignment really in the plan and other elevations, essentially. And like I say, when they find this thing, I'm pretty confident it's going to be where it needs to be. Right. Okay. Yeah, you know, when I was with Shishkin, I have a recording of my meeting with Shishkin. It was about 2 or 3 hours long. And he was saying that he's got all of his understanding from downloads, as you might call it, but some people call it inspiration. There's a lot of words for it. God downloads, Akashic records accessing, I don't know, whatever, you know. And he says that because it comes from that source, and whether it came from that source or not, because of the importance of that he felt the information was, he had no right to keep it to himself, and his only point of getting that information was to share it forward. And I said, well, that's exactly how I feel. It's pointless for me to hold on to this. If I'm wrong, so be it. That's just the way it is. But you know, to have found these things in Lion, to be roundly mocked and ridiculed for saying, well, you're just seeing clouds. I'm saying, no, this is eaten through the fused quartz, right? And it was never at 1700 degrees C. What's going on? And it has this specific overlaid structure. And I knew I'd seen something, or it kind of rang true with me, but I didn't understand what it was for a long time, really. You know, well, for a couple of weeks anyway, but it was long. It felt like a long time. You know, and then to find years later that it's literally in a patent at the end of the Cold War for a quantum coherent nuclear reactor that creates a monopole from magnetic charges that are solitons, that leads to nucleon decay and synthesis of other elements. I mean, it's like everything's in there. So a lot of people have had this question that Ken Pratt's got. If you make a smaller scale, make a breaker, will it work? Basically, well, we know 100% it works at every scale that we've seen it work. So that is at, you know, 400 microns across in an ultra experiment. We've seen it much smaller in these these HHO experiments in an unorganized way. But the problem with those experiments, you're using the burning of the gas to create the plasma to assist in the process of creating the self-organized structure. And you're getting confused with these hot plasma processes, these thermal plasma processes, which are leading to the cold plasma coherent matter processes that are producing the incredibly bright light that fooled so many people working with HHO for so long by making it look like it was thermally black body radiation hot when it wasn't. It was coherent matter interaction that was doing the work. And so is nuclear decay the same as proton decay? Well, if you have a proton that's according to Matsumoto, if you have intense clusters of electrons that lead to polarization of a proton such that it separates into a positron, a neutrino, and a neutron, then you kind of have a decay. You have a positron decay of a proton, and that is a decay of a... No. What I'm talking about proton decay is it splits into its quarks, and then they decay, and you get mesons or whatever, pions or whatever, but you end up with photons, a range of photons, and essentially leptons, which include charged and uncharged leptons. Uncharged leptons are neutrino type things, and charged leptons are things like electrons, muons, tauons, and stuff. But the thing is that they go out, they hit the coherent matter, and then the coherent matter says, I'll have whatever energy you give me in whatever form you give it to me, and I'll decide what it's going to be at the end of my shift, if you know what I mean. When the music stops, I'll decide what it's going to end up as, depending on, what I've aggregated and how big I am at the time, my standing wave that's involved, if you kind of think of it like that. So, if you want to get certain things out of this, you have to either have a structure that captures certain things that it can produce in certain places, like you see on the ultra experiments. The certain lighter elements are produced on one side, certain heavier elements are produced on the other side. If you had an experiment that was doing this at much smaller scales, and was doing it and then changing the location of doing it and then changing the location of doing it again, you'd end up with a hodgepodge of elements all mixed together. The beauty of having something that runs at very low frequency, in the case of ultra or maybe ultra low frequency, potentially like the Great Pyramid of Giza, is that you can very precisely locate where the action will occur. Okay, both the disruption at each fractal level and any potential assembly of matter or assembly of etheric matter. Grapes make plasma. Yeah, the grapes make plasma if you've got a microwave. So Ken is asking, does it automatically make larger ones? What I'm arguing in this sample here is, because it's made of spin matter, okay, because it's made of spin matter, it's starting to bend. Can you see that bend? Okay, that bend. That bend in the material here. So it's bending there. It's actually bending with the fulcrum being the vesica Pisces cutting through the hole, okay? And I argue that this is spin matter, and so it's going to be folding this material around, and it would make a bigger one, right, of spin matter, and then that would, if there was more metal over here, it would then start doing that again, and it would always create this resonant node on one side that is kind of like assembling, right? And it would always be opposite it. Now, if you've just got hydrogen atmosphere, this happens in the atmosphere. You don't even see the folding of the material and the clustering and making it bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, folding on itself. So I haven't done the full animation in my head. I know it's kind of the right direction to go, and at some point I'll kind of work it out, and then I'll do it, and then it'll be done. But someone else might do it, and that'll be great. But that's kind of how I would like sort of sketch out what I see is going on based on what's happening in this piece of material. And so, and what I'm saying is to get the wheel within a wheel within a wheel, you only need 3 levels. I've always said that ever since I saw the structures, the footprints on the Hutchison fracture sample, MFMP fracture sample. I saw more than 3 levels, but it's only necessary to show 3 levels to do the wheel within a wheel within a wheel, because that gives you your 3 axes. Okay. So Creating Waves says, how is your Geet coming along? I'll share a video of Henk Uren. He's done a Geet. He's got it running under load. However, when it's running under load, the bubbler gets too cold, and then and when he's changing the load, the mix has to change. So he's going through some of the learning curves on that, and there's some things that we need to get working. But really, to do this properly, we need to get that plasma ball state. And so David Boutillier is focusing more on understanding where to get the plasma state that's going on. And once you've got the plasma state, then you're in a whole different ball game. You're not in this vaporizing carburetor or whatever. You're in this field of this coherent matter nuclear reactions. Do you think this is what Walt Disney was saying with Mickey Mouse? Yeah, it's all Mickey Mouse technology. It's quite a funny phrase, that, when you think about that. If that is it, then that would be the most advanced technology there is. It's all Mickey Mouse technology. I think what Mickey Mouse was playing on was the cuteness of the sacred geometry. Not necessarily that they knew that what was going on. But, you know, if the Masons know more than they were letting on, specifically in carrying the technology forward, is architectural memes, as it were, if they actually genuinely knew how to do it, then, yeah, possibly. And it might have been, you know, every time you've heard the Mickey Mouse technology, it was actually a joke within a joke for some people. So so a lot of people are saying, yeah, the bubbler gets cold and the heavy gases stop turning to vapor, and this is true. So David proposed as a stopgap to work out how to get the heat working properly. You literally have a heater heating the bubbler, right? So you compensate for that until you fix the other areas of it. The key, I believe, is getting to the point where you have that plasma state. When you've got that plasma state, then you're in a whole different regime of how the process works. Yeah, I had some slides on. I mentioned the scarab beetle before, about the transformation and rebirth and stuff like that. It was one of my original slides, 120 or so slides, or in O-Day back at the beginning of 2018. So yeah, I mean, but there's other aspects that I want to talk about that with anti-gravity, the subject the US Navy dislikes me mentioning more than anything else. So Tom Grosset saying, any good books that you can recommend on sacred geometry? Absolutely, I have no idea. No idea. Well, what I did was I looked at experimental data for years, and I go, why has this all got the same pattern? What is this pattern? I'm sure I've seen this pattern somewhere before. And then I started going, okay, if I do this and that, what is this looking like? Oh my God, this is looking like, oh, that looks like the Vesica Pisces. Okay. All right. So, okay. And then if you do, and it kind of just fell into place. So like I've come at this from looking at scientific data and ended up at, oh God, it's literally the sacred geometry. There we go. I didn't start with sacred geometry and see if there's anything in the data that could lead me to that. You know what? So yeah, so like there's all roads that lead to the truth. There's only one truth. and my view was, when I saw this in Lion and this in Lion, and this was in line with the B field, right? And this was perpendicular to the B field, with the B field running through the center. I said there's something that's related to electromagnetism and is doing something absolutely phenomenal, and I couldn't find anything in the literature. And so when I started seeing these same structures on many other things, and here's some other comparisons with Solen's work. So like, Solen is the man. So we have the line with the marks around it, and these are clusters of these structures, like little clusters of ball lightnings in bead rings. And you can understand now, hopefully, why they are, they can self-cluster by now. You should be able to understand that. And here's this triangle, and here's one triangle on Lion on the copper oxide, and here's another one of these triangles on the Lion. Again, it's slightly off. It's not perfect shape. It's always off. And you can actually see on this one here, it has this vortical nature down to a point as it's cut into the glass. And so, like, it was like, what is this? And, I think we know a little bit more. And obviously these beams that he has in his patent as well. And these effectively coherent matter waves that are causing the damage to the materials. And what I was talking about earlier, where it's going across a valley, this is what I'm talking about. This is what I was talking about. So you had the north here, and it's firing material across this valley. So this is essentially what you are seeing on the here, where it's shooting material out of here into this structure here. It's the same thing that you're seeing here. Okay. Now, like I said, there were some that were vertical, and you can see it here. It's coming up vertically and going down. There's another one here, very much smaller, and there's another one over here that it highlights in a second, coming up and going down. But it's this one that is similar to what we're talking about here, this north going across the valley. Originally, I thought these were going all the way through the material, but they're not. They're doing exactly what they were doing on this, coming out and going in. But they're just part of the substructure. Again, same thing going on here. Same thing at different scales. So, like, my view was, did I want to do a presentation tonight? And I said, well, I have to clarify, a couple of points. The alpha is on, because I saw it on my photo on the so-called sarcophagus in the King's Chamber. It is approximately in the center. I don't see the omega. It doesn't make sense to me for the omega to be there. It should be the alpha, because it's the rebirth of the material, or the rebirth of whatever. Okay. And it is where it would come in. So the material is coming into the backside. Okay. So it is where it should be, and off to that side. So, like, it makes sense. These aspects, the aspects of where the second chamber is relative to it, and the east-west ratio. If you want to think about it, and I started taking pictures of churches, looking at the Vatican layout, and even churches in my local town, you can understand that if you have a church who has the branches of the church, or is it called the transepts or something? Maybe someone may be able to think this out, but like, where the congregations sit is basically in the Sothic triangle cone, right? Because what you're looking at here, if I put in the main cone here, right, and I take out I'll put the lemon into the background. What you've got here is, if you look at the Vatican, it actually has two lobes either side, and almost the entire Vatican Church fits within the Vesica Pisces. And there is a beam that comes out into down the sort of body of the church, and it goes into the outside area. And so, like, it's structure, and it's aligned with it's the opposite way round, let's say, but the north. I actually have to do it this way around. I put the inside here, inside alone. Okay, so the north is facing north, but you've got to imagine that you're kind of rotating this structure. Okay, so that that's what it is. And so, in my view, churches that are formed in the shape of a cross, with their their crosses facing, the bits going out to the side facing north and south, they are actually energy structures that are using this same technology, and they will be pulling an energy beam of some type, potentially, if it's designed well, through the congregation. Go figure. It's actually possibly very good for you to go to church. Yeah, so that would be great to have bolt-on geet. Like the problems that David identified, and that also Henk has actually found, is that the vibrations caused by some of the extra pipe work cause the geet reactor sometimes to break off from the engine. So there's some problems to think about. Yeah, so I'm planning to redesign my bedroom, and I'm going to align my bed based on what I've learned. Because if you're lucky, you've got 8 hours in the day where your body can be aligned north-south relative to what it needs to be. And so I'm going to think about what the best orientation for the body is. I'm sure there's something like Feng Shui that says you should have your body in a particular orientation. Whatever it will be because of this technology, or rather, how the body works in relation to this technology. So I'm gonna be looking at where the best alignment is for the bed in my as I plan the bedrooms for the kids and myself. And I genuinely think you would sleep better. I think you would be healthier, and you would dream more lucidly by aligning your bed correctly. Space Case, this is what I'm going to work out. It just dawned on me when I realized churches were clearly traditionally built. Christian churches were built either knowingly or unknowingly, or just passed down through Mason law, or just because someone said, "Yeah, you got to face east," type thing. Then if you face, the short arm of the cross east, you're gonna have one of the side arms going north, one side going south, and you're gonna have the congregation in the Sothic cone, aren't you? So, it's literally amazing when you understand it. It's just it's demystifies so much, and it gives you a logical, clear understanding of why things are like that. Yeah, so I was a choir boy from the age of 5 through to 13 in a proper choir. And we had pipe organs in there, and I was very dismayed to go back and see that they'd replaced this wonderful Victorian pipe organ with a similarly sounding but less in your gut reverberations digital thing. I mean, it sounded the same, but yet when that pipe organ, that huge wonderful Victorian pipe organ would let rip, you literally felt it through your entire body. And I grew up with that. And I did feel pretty good, I have to say. I'm not so sure it's as simple as North. That's kind of where I'm thinking, but I need to think about it more. I just know you are. There will be an orientation that will give you better sleep. There will be an orientation that gives you better dreams and more lucid dreams, and this is science, and it's science that I never thought I would consider, and it's all because of studying low-energy nuclear reactions. It's mind-boggling to think that you could literally just observe what nature did in this experiment. What nature did in this experiment and come up with the fact that it's basics, is literally the nature of the way the universe works, and you fighting it is just going to make your life difficult. It's magnetic north. The orientation that you'll need to be, whichever it is, will need to be magnetic north. we are a... If you think we've got ions in our bloodstream, we are literally salt creatures. Therefore, you've kind of got a blood plasma. You literally got free electrons running around. We are an electrical creature, therefore we will respond to being in structures that leverage the understanding of this technology, and at the basic level we will respond better. I mean, like I was saying, in the LION reactors you create an artificial north-south by having a solenoid, right? Okay. And in line with this solenoid, we got this structure. And you can even see the solenoid bend here. This is orthogonal to the solenoid. This is coming from the outside in, and this is coming from the inside out. So the one coming from the inside out was in line with the B field, and the one coming from the outside in was 90 degrees to that. And it was actually not only 90 degrees. So like, if you can imagine this is the reactor. Let's say this is the reactor. I've just blown it up for you. There we go. Have I got a pen in here? Maybe this is just not clear to you, and it really should be. I don't have a pen. Okay, all right. So, but this is our reactor, and we got north over here, and we got south over here. The one that you see here, okay, the one that's coming from the inside out, it was here, halfway up and in line with the north-south B field. Okay, the one that was coming from the outside in was on the top and running 90 degrees to the B field. So it was not only it didn't just go 90 degrees to the B field that way, it was actually up here and rotated. Okay, you get it? And that for me told me that this was very special. It had to be related because it looked like a big thing. It had to be some coherent structure of some kind. And, I have to thank Lion for, sharing that reactor with me and saying, see what you can see. This is what I saw. You might be right, DIY projects with Chauxus. He says, I wonder if you can find gold the same way. I'm sure there will be likely places for this to be based on understanding what the technology is. I will talk about... probably I will talk about the 3D structure and how it relates to anomalies in the Geek reactor next week. And that's probably what I will do next week. Because it needs to be said so people can understand those anomalies, because they're not really that anomalous. It's pretty simple to understand. Yes, Corky Goss. I know a lot of people have talked about the electrical nature of the body, but it never occurred to me that literally orienting my body. I know I saw these people like meditating in India all the time in Kerala. They would go to the beach and at sunset they would be facing the sun and which is essentially mostly west, particularly in Kerala where the sun really doesn't change its position much. And they would sit there meditating, and they're pointing west. So like one part of the brain is north, and the other part south, and so and I would think there wasn't too much to this, but then it kind of maybe there is. Maybe there is. I've had to take a lot of humble pie in this process. Okay, so for those that didn't see it, I shared an image that I took in the Great Pyramid of Giza in Egypt. And where is it? It is this one. And apart from the comedy of having freestanding air conditioning units attempting to cool a enclosed space, which all it does is it heats it up, I noted that what appears to be approximately halfway down the how should we put this, the west side of the so-called sarcophagus in the so-called King's Chamber, where I would believe that the flux of material is coming from, in the same way that it's coming in the back here into the back structure. Okay, it would be coming in here. There is, in my view, I would agree, there is a clear alpha, okay, carved into the top surface. Apparently there's an omega here. I just don't see it. It's just not, it's not what this looks like good craftsmanship. This looks like a lot of things that have been broken up, and I don't know. I just don't see it. So having alpha and omega there does not make sense. There's no logical sense to me. But to have alpha there makes complete sense, because at the end of death, at the end of your coherent matter stream, having converted matter into etheric matter, into prima matter, prima materia, and then passing it through your beam, you're coming into your maker here, and then after this point, you are ending up by creating new life, new matter, whatever, and that would be pointing into this chamber. Okay, so I will share this image on the relevant blog for this. And yeah, there we go. And I went over all the findings since the last presentation. And essentially, this is similar in structure to this mystery object, which had this piece of pile of stuff piled onto it, which liked to move around with it and stay in exactly the same place. So I think there's some intense field, or that this silicon dioxide was magnetized in some way. but I believe it's the same structure, and I believe that Solen had also seen this in his work, which I showed here or something. Yeah, there you go. So that's from Solen's patent from 1992, and he said this is a key feature, and I've shown this in other experiments. And yeah, so because of the synthesized elements in here that were not present in the 225-day reactor of Alexander Parkhomov, I would expect there to be synthesized elements here in this zone. So I cannot wait to get this on a SEM, large table SEM, and I would expect to see carbon, silicon and oxygen at least in here. And anything else will be a bonus. Could we see some lead? Because lead likes to be produced in LENR. If there is lead in there, then it supports all of those people that have observed lead, including ourselves. There's energy to be gained from going down to iron from copper and zinc. There is energy to be gained by almost any element doing an exchange reaction with hydrogen and producing elements in between hydrogen and the element that it's doing an exchange reaction. And there is energy to be gained by fusing up to lead. And in fact, it might fuse beyond lead, but because LENR likes to produce something that's stable, lead tends to be the natural end stop. Bismuth is technically unstable, although it's very stable without LENR involved. And there we go. So this looks like it's doing transmutation. I expect it did. And so we just need to verify this, and then I think, you know, we could probably replicate this experiment. I expect this structure would turn up again, and you know, it'd just be science. Then again, we'd be back to the future. Yeah. Can you map where you see rainbows and let me know? Well, a rainbow moves dependent on your aspect to it, right? Because it's a visual effect. It's relative to the point source of light and the refracting water droplets and where you're standing relative to the other two. So, like, I don't know what you're trying to say there. Okay. All right. Well, that's a view, I guess. So, Nabon Vega pillow, yes, reminds me of something from YouTube Ancient History. Yeah, maybe. ST Martin's talking about the pillow that was produced by Henk Uren, which seemed to partially or almost fully replicate some Hutchison effect, but maybe even extend it to a degree. Yeah, I mean, we need to look at that. Basically, the clusters, when they get to the edge, they act differently because there's a less density of them because there's an edge. And so it doesn't seem to disrupt the edge, and so you end up with this disruption internally, and then it blows up because you're getting a gasification of the material in there, and a kind of jellification, but a bound jellification of the outside shell. Even if it's got a hole in it, kind of like still puffs up. So, did you see that there is a 4 yin yang on that patient? Don't know what you're talking about there. Sorry. Yeah, I agree with that sentiment, Alex. That you can't get this easily, but it's really simple if you bother to pay attention. And it's not, like, to be fair, a lot of this is in religious teachings across religions. but it's like, I don't know whether they deliberately are keeping the truth behind it like secret because of all the other stuff it can reveal, or they genuinely don't know. It's I always give two examples to this, and I've mentioned at least one of them before. One is like there's this ritual in India of doing the puja at dawn and dusk. And why do you do it? Well, it's a ritual, and like you're doing it for that reason. But like when you create smoke in the house, it stops the mosquitoes, which appear at dawn and dusk, and they don't bite you, so you don't die from mosquito-borne diseases. So, like, are the gods favoring you, or did someone just work out the mosquitoes aren't in the house if you do smoky house at dawn and dusk, right? And it's like they have this ritual of, in India, for instance, of eating a pan leaf. Now, a pan leaf has an opiate kind of aspect to it with some of the alkaloids in there if you kind of freebase it with whatever else. But if you just eat it, the alkaloids in there have got no psychoactive nature to them. And so what they have in India, in some parts of India, you'll get like these different kind of mouth freshening seeds, and they will be inside a pan leaf that's folded over, and you will typically eat this after eating some food at some food festival, right? And the alkaloids actually kill parasites and bacterias and stuff that are not typically give you stomach problems. Okay, so it's like this is a traditional thing that you eat after the meal, but actually it stops you from becoming sick from food poisoning. So like knowledge can be passed down as a tradition, as an artistic aesthetic, and people can follow that, and they can recognize something is beautiful, or they can see that you seem to be favored by the gods because you puja and because you eat your pan leaf, but actually there's just a bit of science behind it that you don't know, and your mum didn't know, and your grandmother didn't know, or your art teacher didn't know why they were teaching you it. But the science behind these things, and science someone already worked out so long ago that it beggars belief that it's actually worked out by anyone. Okay, it is 1:06 here. I think I'm probably done for the day. So thank you for those people that joined me today. Like I say, I didn't feel I wanted to do something today, but I think it was useful. This was Ode elevation plan. So we dealt with the elevations of the pyramid, the north-south and the east-west elevations, and we dealt with the plan, and we cross-related that back to the experimental data from Vega and other experiments like Lion and so forth. The structure that's found that is the same kind of shape as the subterranean level of the Great Pyramid, it would appear, was also in Michael Solen's 1992 quantum coherent nuclear reactor that allowed for disruption of matter, including the decay of nucleons and the formation of new elements and energy streams. And that this was also, it would seem to be, appear in the 225-day LENR reactor of Alexander Parkhomov. And therefore I'm more and more confident that this is the process behind all LENR processes. I'm more and more confident this is the process behind absolutely every working or claim to have been working over Unity technology. And it is not patentable. It is just a natural process, and it is the same thing as ball lightning. And the mother of all ball lightning generators on planet Earth was the Great Pyramid of Egypt. And I think some people knew this technology so implicitly. And of course, there are many different implementations of it with different levels And we've shown how you can have not just this fractal 2, but you can have 3, 4, 5. You can see that in galaxies which have not just 2-arm galaxies, but you have 3 and whatever arm galaxies. You know, these things are things that exist. But if you if you only have one structure, it's just a single NTOR without a partner. So it still can be fractal, but it's then a different structure, right? If you have 2, that is the simplest fractal structure. Okay, you can have a 3, 4, 5, whatever, blah blah blah, potentially up to 48. And what you're seeing here potentially is a 4 structure, but it has these 4 structure around it. What is that telling us? I don't know. Is that this one TOR here with just 2 sections to it? I don't know, but I believe that this is someone who knew, or again might have had this knowledge passed to them as a thing that is important. You should know this, and I don't even know why you should know this, but someone told me you should know this, right? And they thought it was important to put in their seal, as other people chose other things important to put in their seals. And so, you know, knowledge passes forward, but, you know, if we actually look at what nature does rather than what people's summarized over thousands of years interpretations without connection of nature does, then maybe we can actually work with nature resonantly and efficiently. And the idea that humans were just getting good at carving rock 4,500 years ago, in my mind, is completely blown out of the water by what I witnessed earlier this week, and just a few days ago, in fact, in this site, these artifacts from this site from Cyprus, which were potentially as much as, you know, 9,000 years ago. 9,000 years ago. Now, granted, these might not be the hardest materials that are possible to be carved, but I think in 4,500 years they might have learned some other techniques for dealing with other materials. And for me, the fact that there was a community that had fortifications and access paths, and they farmed animals, and they grew crops, as well as hunting and gathering. Of course, why wouldn't you? You know, I have friends that hunt and gather, so, you know, it's not like backward, it's like actually quite good, right? And they processed their things, they stored their things, they cooked meals, they, you know, all of this stuff going on 9,000 years ago, right? And these are possibly the start of very much more, you know, advanced peoples post Ice Age. But were there peoples that had lived in a time of plenty and a time of stability for hundreds of thousands of years prior to the Ice Age, or prior to, let's say, the Younger Dryas events or whatever? And in that time, they learnt the technology that we are, again, learning. We are not the most advanced civilization that has lived on this earth, in my opinion. Any civilization in the universe that has learnt and mastered vacuum engineering and to work with nature the way that nature works, in my view, are the most advanced civilizations in the universe. And I think we can do it again. So thank you very much for your time, and I will see you in the next video. Dobranoc. Buenas noches. Good night.